What Nick Sirianni is saying is that this is a smart team. This is a smart franchise. We are a smart group going forward. And if we play smart, the way we play smart is by dumbing it down. He literally went out on the podium and said that the way that this team gets smarter, even though they're so smart, is by playing dumb. Welcome to the ChadBurn Show, brought to you by M. Chad Baldwin. Hello and welcome to the ChadBurn Show. I am your host, M. ChadBurn, and we are back for another episode. Kind of stuck in the doldrums of the weekend before the Super Bowl, after the NFC and AFC championship games, just waiting for the big game, the game we've all been just so excited to see, the matchup between Patrick Mahomes and the GOAT Tom Brady. There's just be so much unpacked there, but unfortunately, again, we have to wait a week. We had a weekend without football. We had to take some time to look at other sports. We had to watch some basketball. We had to watch some other things. Again, not against our own will. We wanted to watch these things, but we, of course, would love to watch some football. But luckily, the football gods have answered with a great matchup coming up this weekend, February 7th, the Super Bowl 55. It's going to be an excellent match with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buccaneers, so cannot wait for that. But because there were no football games last weekend, there's not much for us to analyze. So, we're going to wait till then, going to wait till the game so we can have our post-game reaction, talk about the successes and the keys to victory for whichever team ends up on top, going with the Chiefs and obviously Patrick Mahomes. But there's still a lot to discuss, especially for the Philadelphia Eagles. And this episode, I warn you now, is going to be a little Eagle heavy. Because obviously last week was the, I would say, initial press conference, the first, speaking arrangement of the new head coach for the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Sirianni. And we got to hear a lot. We got to hear what Nick's 5 key factors to success are, what Nick believes is a way to be a winning organization, a winning team. So we'll break down those 5 keys. And then we're also going to dive into a little bit of a, I wouldn't say controversy, but an interesting, interview given by Malcolm Jenkins on Carson Wentz and why the team suffered so much after seeing so much success with him at the helm, and why he had one of the worst seasons in, quarterback history. I mean, it was just so awful last year. He was the worst quarterback in the league after, posting up what was a MVP caliber season in 2017 and still performing to pretty high heights in 2019 to receive himself a $127 million contract. So the man has earned his spot in the league, but he has absolutely just fallen down from the pedestal in this most recent campaign. So we will break down Malcolm Jenkins' comments, how it fits into Nick Sirianni's 5 pillars for success, and just go over our initial reactions to that press conference and what to expect in the next coming weeks. So until then, let's break down the Nick Sirianni press conference. So we got our glimpse at the new head coach. He looked young. He looked like he had new ideas. He looked terrified. My God, I mean, the man up there looked like a deer in headlights. And, of course, it is a tough situation to be a head coach, and especially for in the Philadelphia Eagles team and the organization with a very intense media, frenzy around it that will always be covering the team 24/7 and a fan base that demands excellence and nothing less. That can be intimidating to most people going up on that stage. And it's not easy to talk off the cuff. It's not easy to go through prepared remarks. It takes training. It takes some time. And Nick Sirianni was getting his first taste of the limelight, the first taste of being the head coach where everyone must answer to him. So I did not know what to expect. I wasn't surprised that he was nervous. I wasn't surprised that he might have stumbled along the way. I was a little surprised to see the owner talk forever to begin the press conference and not really give his man a chance to just step right into the limelight and let him enter. Jeffrey Lurie needs to learn to kind of share the spotlight, obviously, and to give his coach really a chance to speak. But that is one observation. The other one is really just going through, if we don't take the performance of the press conference at least, allow us to look more at, the substance of the speech, there are at least some things we can discuss and go through and really see how that will translate to this season and how it translates to a success for his football team. So Nick Sirianni laid out his 5 key factors to have success, to be a successful football team in the league. We know, obviously, he has spent most of his time under Frank Reich, that Frank Reich speaks very highly of Nick Sirianni, believes he is a very smart offensive mind, that he has a lot that he can offer to every team that he goes to. He's worked most of the time with quarterbacks. He's worked with wide receivers. He's, gone back and forth and really, on San Diego Chargers when they were in San Diego, LA Chargers, then the Colts. I mean, he's been around. He's seen a lot of good coaches. And the staff that he's putting together is clearly a staff that is a young staff, a staff that is, supposed to kind of jumpstart this team, revitalize it with a young, perspective, a fresh take. We have the young defensive coordinator. We have a new offensive coordinator who's also young, coming from the LA Chargers. Obviously, the defensive coordinator comes from the Indianapolis Colts. He apparently was, a target amongst many teams. A lot of people wanted to bring him on their staff, so that was a good get there. I do think it's going to be great to have him as defense coordinator. But we wanted to know more about Nick. Who is Nick Sirianni? What makes him tick? Oh, Nick Tick, look at that. But here were the 5 key points. He started off with his first point being, for success, the team needs to connect and trust. Simple enough. The team needs to be able to connect with each other, have a team atmosphere, and be able to trust one another. I think that is something we can all stand by and all agree with. And if Nick Sirianni brings that to the locker room, excellent. I think one aspect we've always believed that has been strong about the Philadelphia Eagles throughout the last few seasons, even during the tumultuous 2020 campaign, was that they've had a very good locker room culture. The players really rally around each other. They believe in each other. They help each other up. And that's something I believe that if Nick can continue to do, and he can bring that to the team and continue to foster that, then I am all for it. I do believe that teams who have a great locker room, teams that trust each other and can rely on each other and there's not any infighting, those are teams that will see sustained success. And those are teams that will get past very far in the playoffs. And they will be able to, play many years in very difficult situations and come out on top in close games because they trust one another to do their job. And that was what Nick really got across. He said, we need to be able to trust each other to do what they're expected to do and be able to look to the person on my left and know he's got my back and I can connect with him and get that done. I don't think Nick Sirianni says eloquently, but I still believe that he stands by that, and that is a good trait to have as a head coach. That's one trait, and I got to say, I support it. I think that is a great one, and I think Nick Sirianni did well opening with that. Number 2, compete with each other. There have been some talks, and we're going to get into this later, that Doug Peterson may have coddled some players on this team. Doug Peterson may have had some favorites, had some people that he believed needed a little special extra treatment. And I think that is something that's going to be changed with Nick Sirianni. And from everything I heard is that he really focuses on hard practices. He wants people to really compete and really go out there and work their butt off on the practice field. And if we get even a taste of what Nick Sirianni has done in his previous coaching roles, then the compete with each other is something I strongly stand behind. I think obviously that the players need to continue to compete. I don't think we've gotten the best out of players every year. Especially over the last 2 years, a complaint I've had, especially with Doug Peterson, is that the teams don't look prepared when they come into games. They don't look to be at top level and top shape to take on their competitors. And I think a lot of that goes back to the practice. How are they practicing? How are they preparing? Are they working hard in practice? Are they playing at game speed in practice so they're ready to get into that moment in the game? I think Doug Peterson focused more on looking at walkthroughs, going through the plays at the practice. There have been talks that, again, he wasn't necessarily getting the hardest out of every player. So hopefully we get some grit with Nick Sirianni here, and we're able to push that competitive level up in this team. We know that the locker room has been great and that they work hard, and there are some players on this roster who are dogs. Like, they are going to grind and fight for everything, and they're going to compete to their last breath. But there are obviously others who are not achieving at the level they should be. So maybe if we change the practice culture, we can change the game culture, and we can start seeing more success. I think Nick Sirianni is excellent to bring this up, and I think this is a great pillar for his success, and it made me excited to hear that as well. Hopefully, on top of that, is that if we practice well, we compete well, when that goes into the game level, maybe we don't have as many injuries. Maybe if we practice better, we're not going to be going into the game crippled with all these people out for the season. That's something I hope they change a lot this offseason, is that staff, is the health staff. Are they able to, go the next step and be able to make sure that everyone is on that team healthy, that everyone on that team is ready to play every week? Because we had way too many injuries going into the season, and it was just ridiculous. I mean, obviously there's some luck into it, and some teams face adversity with regards to injuries every year, but we can't have that happening to the Eagles 3 years in a row. There has to be a change with how we done. The health, the sleep, what have you, something has to change. Because the players are clearly crumbling right now in this franchise, and that just can't happen. So compete with each other. I think that's a great one, and we'll kind of relate that later to another point that we'll have to bring up later in the show. The next one is accountability. Accountability. Maybe it's a little basic, but I think it's a very strong one to have. Hopefully he can resonate this with the team. Everyone is accountable for their role. Everyone is accountable for each other. If you're accountable as a team, then no one can sit idly by when they are not performing. It is important for everyone to keep themselves held to a high standard at this franchise. We cannot expect us to have success, make it to the playoffs, sustain continued playoff runs if the players are not accountable to each other, if the coaches aren't accountable to each other. It goes both ways, right? The coaches expect something out of the players, and the players expect something out of the coaches. Over the last few years, I don't think the coaches have been as accountable to their own discretions against this team. I believe that the players as well have a long way to go, but now we have a coach that believes in accountability, and hopefully he will hold himself accountable to the highest standard throughout this season. I believe Nick Sirianni will struggle. This team is not ready to win right away next year. I think we could have an okay season, but we're not going to be knocking off the doors right away. This league is a very tough competitive league, and Nick Sirianni is going to take his lumps. But at least if they're accountable to each other, they're able to go to the film, understand where they went wrong, what they didn't do right, and be able to talk about it openly with other players, with coaches, and then work to correct it. Then we could have a successful team and a successful organization going forward. Nick Sirianni, again, did not speak well up on the podium, but at least the fundamentals are of how this team will succeed can be praised. I think that he is coming with at least a sound mind, sound judgment. He's going to be at least a decent coach with some very key fundamental aspects to his coaching. And I think a lot of it comes from who he has watched and who he's discussed with. I think Frank Reich has been a great mentor to him, and hopefully he can bring some of that Frank Reich, energy and pizzazz that he had on the Eagles in 2017 and now with the Colts. Hopefully he can bring that to this Eagles organization. But accountability is huge. I think there's been a strong lack of accountability as a team, and clearly this is what he hit a million times when he was interviewing. I mean, again, this is the list that he interviewed with. So Jeffrey Lurie clearly liked this because something has been missing in this organization to keep players, up to the highest standard. So accountability number 3. This is when he lost me. This is when Nick Sirianni started, to me, falling off the map for sure for me. Number 4 is smart. Play smart. The unfortunate thing, though, is Nick Sirianni said they would play smart. So that way we're going to get the playbook to be scaled down to make sure that everyone knows what's going to happen. And that each player is going to play, the position correctly. The playbook's not going to be complicated. Everyone can understand the plays. It's very translatable, easy to learn. That's how we're going to play smart. We're going to play smart by knowing the playbook inside and out and make sure we know all of our assignments. But when you really listen to it, what Nick Sirianni is saying is that this is a smart team. This is a smart franchise. We are a smart group going forward. And if we play smart, the way we play smart is by dumbing it down. He literally went out on the podium and said that the way that this team gets smarter, even though they're so smart, is by playing dumb. He wants to simplify the playbook because they can't figure out a more complicated playbook? Are you saying the players can't get more complex schemes? I don't get this one. Like, everyone always says you got to play smart. Like, of course, like that is a, mantra of every team of all time. Like, in order to be successful, you must play smart. You can't make stupid mistakes on the field, stupid penalties, stupid drops, bad play calls. All those dumb, idiotic mistakes that lose you games. You can't have that if you want to have success. So obviously, you got to play smart. So maybe, Nick Sirianni is just hitting an obvious point, but don't tell me this is a smart team, but at the same time, you need to dumb everything down. Like, how does that translate in the locker room? I feel like if I were a player, I'd be like, excuse me? What are you saying about me? Are you calling out my intelligence? I get it. You want to give every player the chance to know everything about how you're going to play in the style, and that by playing smarter with a simplified playbook, you obviously can get more out of the player. The problem is that I think if you want to show that they're smart, you challenge them. You give them some more plays outside the box. You give them a chance to, push themselves to really achieve more. I think you need to expect greatness out of a team that you think can be great. I don't know why we need to slim it down. From what I've seen in the last few years, my whole problem with Doug Pearson's playbook is that it was too simple. Teams knew what was coming and it was too hard to develop. I would like to see some creativity that we see on the LA Rams, that we see in Arizona, that we see in 49ers with Kyle Shanahan. And the reason I mention all those teams because those are young coaches who have brought some innovation to the game. That's what I want to see is creativity. Look at the Packers and Matt LaFleur. I know they didn't win, but the creativity is there. I don't want to simplify everything down. I think we need to start bringing a little more to this game with the types of talents we have. I think that we play a different game than most teams because of the talent we have. So why not try and add a little bit more complexity to the playbook? Why not try and add some more motions, some different lineups, a different way to get the offense going? I don't think we have to make it so simplified that it's only a few plays. Let's expect a little more of these players and try and get more out of them. But again, we're a smart team, so we're going to dumb it down. It does not sound good. This is where Nick Sirianni lost me. This is where I started thinking, okay, maybe he's a little over his head. But again, this is what he interviewed on, so this is what he stood by. The first three, I stand by. Connect and trust. Compete with each other. Accountability. Smart? Well, yeah, duh. Let's just hope they're not idiots. We can't have fucking idiots on the field running this play. We need actual smart people running the offense and running the defense. So, again, a little weak, but I can stand by it. And number 5, fundamentals. He hit this a million times. Fundamentals. All those fundamentals out there. In order to play well, we need to practice our fundamentals. He even evoked a Kobe Bryant analogy about how much Kobe Bryant worked so hard at his game in order to get better, and that even though he was great, he still grinded every day to work at the fundamentals of basketball in order to be great and excellent and one of the best of all time. So Nick Sirianni going for a classic grab of Kobe Bryant during a time where it was the anniversary, obviously, of the loss of Kobe Bryant and his daughter. This was, it was a sad moment, but not bad play. The press team clearly was getting him ready, having some topical, relevant, pieces to discuss. So not so bad. But again, fundamentals. I'm okay with this. There were some very bad mistakes last year in the Eagles front. I mean, when we watched the blocking, there were players running into each other. They weren't lining up right. The handoffs were bad. The linemen weren't communicating well on defense. Wide receivers open. The cornerbacks weren't playing well. They weren't, they're biting or over committing. So maybe fundamentals is something we need to hammer again. I think something that gets lost in all this is that this is a team that's in rebuild mode, right? We've already admitted that this team is not good as they are. They need to get better. So in order to get better, you bring in young talent. You start building up talent out of the college ranks and through the draft. And in order to get the best out of those talent, you need them to continuously practice the fundamentals in order to play sound football. So I'm okay backing up fundamentals here, but what more are you going to do? I think there still needs to be a lot of discussion around what does it entail around that fundamentals. What are we going to expect out of these players? How are we going to continue to practice fundamentals and get better? I think when you look at this, a lot of this, again, a new coach comes in trying to set a new culture, trying to set a new stage for what it is that his reign as head coach is going to be like. And a lot of this I see is definitely more on the side of rebuilding a young team. I think that the team wants to get young because we've been so old for so long after some terrible contracts by Howard Roseman. Still can't believe he's on this team. But it looks like he's really starting to set the playbook for something to be for a young, new talent coming into a franchise, of rebuilding with people that haven't been an Eagle for years, that have just coming to the team and need to learn quickly what it is that they need to do to be great on this team. So I think with the fundamental piece, it's the same deal. I stand by it. I think it's great. I think Nick Sirianni hit a very good point right here. But, that's why we have to be prepared. Like, a lot of these points that he had here, these 5 keys to success, they sound like dodoys, right? Like, of course, this is what you need to be successful. Of course, this is what you should be preaching to your team in order to find success. Of course, you need to be smart. You need to be accountable. You need to compete during practice in order to get better, and you need to practice your fundamentals. That's all, of course, statements. There's nothing revolutionary about what he said. There's nothing, that's going to change the game with what he said. I think it's just being realistic. He sees the roster. He sees how far we have to grow, and he's like, this is what I'm going to do in order to make sure that our team is going to become consistent and build a winning culture. Hopefully these pillars change a little bit as time goes on, because I want him to kind of inject the team with some new energy and with some new styles and beliefs. But at least for now, it's good. This is the standard key points you want to have a successful team. I'm fine with it. I think Nick Sirianni, again, had a pretty rough press conference in that he looked very nervous. He stumbled in some parts, and he sounded like he was rambling, and it just wasn't very, you didn't get that energy, that excitement for him as a head coach. But I will say he comes with some at least sound beliefs and some sound fundamentals as a head coach. So, I think that there could still be some good things ahead with him. I'm not convinced one way or the other that he is a bad coach or good coach, or if he's too in over his head. I think the first press conference, of course, can be overwhelming for a young new head coach. You don't always nail it. You're not always going to get it right. But at least, he comes away with some sound thinking, and at least a sound 5 pillars to success. Again, the smart one's where you lost me, but everything else, yeah. I can argue all of that as being at least decent. So, again, don't always watch him. Read into what he's actually saying. That's what he wants to get across, is what he's trying to teach us, and what he's trying to teach us is the Nick Sirianni way. So when you read into it, I can stand behind it. I think it's going to be okay. Again, he needs some coaching to meet the media. He didn't take a lot of questions. It's, he's not, luckily he's very vague. He's avoiding Carson Wentz answers. So, he's being coached up in the sense of what not to say. But I think it's about time to give the guy some coaching on how to give a press conference, give a speech. I think he needs a little help there, and the Eagles definitely have money they can throw his way to get there. So I think he is on the right path. I'm excited for what I got to hear so far, but I do want to hear more from him. I hope that he meets the press regularly, and that we can start getting, start cracking in on what is Nick Sirianni and how Nick Sirianni will make this team better. Well, now we got to get into the interesting news. So Malcolm Jenkins was on a radio show, and I forget where he was on. Let's see if I can get this right. Right, he was on the Rich Eisen show. Great show, talking with Rich Eisen, talking about some football. And Rich Eisen started asking questions about Carson Wentz. How did someone who had looked to have so much promise, to look to be one of the top-tier quarterback in this league, how did he fall so far from grace? How did he become just so broken? He had one of the worst football seasons we'd ever seen. How did it become so bad? There's no way a quarterback does a complete 180 from such skill to such crap. It was terrible. No matter how I stand up for Carson Wentz, no matter how much support him, I will always say that this season was crap. And it was awful. And as I've said many a time, I do believe that Carson Wentz needs to be traded to another team in order to find success again. I do not think he can find it with this organization, where it's hard to be in a place where you've seen such failure and you've dropped off completely. Sometimes you need a change of scenery. You need to get into a new organization, new way of thinking, get acquainted with a new fan base. All that I think needs to take place in order for him to find success again. But with all that said, it was great to start hearing about what Malcolm Jenkins had to think about the whole situation. Because Malcolm Jenkins is not one just to blow smoke. This is not a guy who's just going to go out there to make a statement in order just to get some attention. He doesn't just talk shit. Malcolm Jenkins always stands behind what he says. He is a man of his word. He really believes that what he says means something. So he's not just going to talk some BS. Malcolm Jenkins is going to really speak from the heart. And he's going to speak of what he saw. And I think it's interesting to see some of what he had to say. So let's start. I'm going to read. I just want to get this quote out of the way, and then we'll talk about what it meant to him. So, quote, as a teammate and friend of Carson, let me get my glasses on so I can do this properly. As a teammate and friend of Carson, I think that it always starts with performance. And he hasn't performed up to the expectations that everyone had for him. And I don't think he would say he's played up to his own expectations. But some of the other issues I felt when I was in the locker room was that there was just too much leeway. And it didn't make him a better player. I don't think they did him any favors by trying to protect his ego or trying to really protect him as a player, as opposed to, just like every other player, keeping it performance-based and really being real about what he needed to improve on, end quote. That's some serious stuff coming from Malcolm Jenkins. So basically what we're finding out from Malcolm Jenkins' statement is that no matter how Carson Wentz performed, the coaches just didn't hold him to any accountability. One of the big pillars for Nick Sirianni for success, accountability. You can't coddle the guy. You can't give him this leeway when he's not performing well. There's no way you can grow. There's no way you can get better if you don't actually look at the things you did wrong and try to improve on them. I was really shocked to hear this from Jenkins because as much as we heard the whole articles that were coming out of Philadelphia about how Carson Wentz was, with his deteriorating relationship, Doug Peterson, his kind of being catty on the field, calling off plays just to kind of spite Doug Peterson. I mean, that all, I don't know if it was as serious or as if they're reading too much into it. Sometimes those things can kind of, explode, get a little bit out there. Rather than just, rather than where they were. I don't think always that, those statements are as factual as they may be. I think sometimes that there may be a little expansion on it. But this is some serious stuff coming from Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm Jenkins is, not one to mess around, not one to mince words. So it's pretty disappointing to hear that this team was letting Carson Wentz get away with his bad performance. That they weren't holding him to the performance that he was out on the field. Anyone with a TV could see that Carson Wentz was playing poorly. That something was fundamentally wrong with his game. And no matter what Carson Wentz did, apparently this coaching staff during the time when Jenkins was there, so again, I should correct myself, not this horrible season, but before in the past when he has struggled, which probably then, expanded and compounded into this season. But the coaching staff was not holding him accountable to the mistakes he was making. And if you're going to always treat him and walk on eggshells around the guy, then eventually he is going to feel that he should be treated a certain way and that you should walk on eggshells around him. A player like Carson Wentz, if you're not going to hold him to the same standard as everyone else, and he starts thinking he's special, and he's a quarterback, which is, one of the most egotistical spots in this league where you have to be a leader and you have to have all this responsibility and everything falls on you. If you're not going to try and make him better and you're just going to treat him like a prince in the organization, then yeah, he might become a bit of a shitty person. And yeah, he might become a bit of a shitty player because then he's not going to look back on the mistakes he made as his mistakes. He's going to try and look for other people's mistakes. Where was the wide receiver off? Why wasn't the line blocking for me? Why are you getting after me for not throwing the ball sooner? I mean, all of that and more is what can attribute then to the downfall of a quarterback that showed a lot of promise. It is damning to hear this from Malcolm Jenkins. It truly is. It is upsetting to hear. And the thing that I think, which is at least positive to hear, because we might be with Carson Wentz for another year, Malcolm Jenkins still sees him as a friend. And Malcolm Jenkins isn't going to see, a fool as a friend, right? He's not going to just be a friend with anyone just to be friends with them. Malcolm Jenkins is only going to say that about people that he actually likes being around. He's a real guy. He keeps it straight. So at least Carson Wentz outside the locker room and the playing field seems to be a good guy. So maybe he can repair those relationships. But for sure, under Nick Sirianni, the accountability, the competing with each other, those keys to success, I think, are directly pointing at Wentz. He was saying that in order to make sure Wentz heard it. I think if you're Wentz and you hear that, I don't know if you get frightful, but at least you know that you're not going to get away with shit anymore. And that you actually have to start performing to the level that this team expects of you, to which the league expects of someone being paid over $120 million. If you're going to start making that kind of cash, if you're going to start getting that contract that only the elite players get, then you need to perform as an elite player. And I hope that this coaching staff can kind of kick his ass and get him going again. Carson Wentz has a long way to go before he's going to be a successful quarterback again in this league. And I think that he needs a coaching staff that is going to really push him and give him a kick in the tuchus to really get him playing again. This guy is just not going to get better again by saying what he did in the past was great. The past is the past. We all saw it happen. We saw him be successful. But what he needs to do is now, in the moment, in this season, he has to play great. You can't rest on your laurels forever. Hell, you haven't even won a Super Bowl with this team. You were on the team, but you didn't play. So maybe Nick Sirianni is the right coach to get that going. Maybe he is, because we know that he builds great relationships with players, but he's also tough on them. And maybe by being tough on Carson Wentz and trying to get the most out of him, you'll finally see some success out of the guy. I do have a lot of hope for Nick Sirianni, and hopefully we can see better. But man, oh man, was it disappointing after being a fan of Carson Wentz to hear this. Because the thing is that as much as a lot of this is on Carson Wentz, it's so disappointing to hear that about the coaching staff. Obviously this is why things were falling apart. This coaching staff just seemed to want to pick favorites and go with it and think everything's okay. Just like the GM thought we can have the same roster we had during the Super Bowl and keep that for 3 years, we're going to keep going to the Super Bowl. No, that's not how it freaking works. That's not how you build and sustain success over years and years and years. And the coaching staff seemed to have the same mentality that if they just kept having the players out there that were successful before, we're going to be successful again without trying to make them get better. So clearly the coaching staff was pretty shit all over the last few years. So I think it is good we're getting some injection of fresh blood. Hopefully Nick Sirianni can really kick everyone into gear and get the best out of every player. We need the best out of every possession in order to see success on this team. That is a fact, and that's something we're going to have to continue to work on in order to see sustained success for the next few years. But hopefully Nick Sirianni is the right guy, and we will finally have another head coach who can get some greatness out of this Eagles franchise. All right, folks, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode. It was fun going all the Eagles again. As you know, as an Eagles fan, this is what I love to do, really focus in on the Birds and start talking about them and planning, even when they're not playing in the postseason. No games, and yet we still have stuff to talk about. Whether it's breaking news from Malcolm Jenkins or the new head coach's press conference, we just had to break it all down. But like I said, football is going to be done soon. Once the Super Bowl passes, NFL season's over. We're going to focus our eyes on the NBA. The Sixers are playing great football. Embiid is an MVP caliber player for sure in this league. And the Sixers are just finding ways to win. I don't always think it looks pretty. I think that there's a lot that could be desired, but they're winning games and they're finding ways to win. And the defense looks good. I know Ben Simmons just doesn't have a jump shot, but man, he still plays like a hell of a player. The amount of assists and the defensive side of the ball is incredible. So, hopefully Doc Rivers can get the band to fucking shoot. But still, at least Sixers look good. I'm loving the whole team. I think it's finally. Dwight Howard had 15 rebounds the other night. That guy came from the grave and is playing great again. So I'm happy to see all that. We'll definitely be breaking down the Sixers after the end of the NFL season and going into the NBA, and obviously later on through the whole NBA season. The 76ers will be a focus there. We'll talk off-season football and the 76ers as they progress through the NBA season. But it's going to be a lot to break down as the next few weeks. So excited for all that. Excited for the Super Bowl. Excited to continue to talk football every week until it's over. But, we're finally getting close to it. but always bring you great Eagles content, great everything. That's what we like to do. So we're happy to do it every week. We will be back next week with another episode. We'll be breaking down the end of the Super Bowl and the successes as we discussed. So look forward to then. Until next time, have a good evening and good night. Thank you for listening to the ChadBurn Show. Remember to check out all new episodes every Monday at 7 p.m. on Google Podcasts, Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and all major platforms where you listen to your podcast. If you'd like to get in touch with me and you want to send in your questions or requests for topics to discuss in the show, you can email chadburn.show@gmail.com. All episodes have video recorded, which is then posted to our YouTube channel, The ChadBurn Show. Be sure to subscribe to us where you get your podcasts or on our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all our new content. You can also follow the show on Instagram at ChadBurn Show and on Facebook, The ChadBurn Show, to see clips from previously recorded episodes and information on all upcoming shows.